small details can have a huge impact on major events. For example, in 1986, the disaster of the Space Shuttle Challenger occurred due to a faulty O-ring which cost only a few dollars. This small component led to the deaths of 7 passengers and the loss of millions of dollars. Similarly, a tiny blood clot, invisible to the naked eye, can become fatal if it blocks blood flow to a vital part of the body, such as the brain. It is important to remember that sometimes the most insignificant things can have the most serious consequences. A tiny accumulation of sticky cells can lead to loss of life. Even a small patch of ice on the road can lead to loss of control of a car in an accident. An unexpected turn of the wheel can lead to a fatal accident on a sharp turn. Examples can be given endlessly. A minor oversight can greatly affect any undertaking. Think about the meaning of marriage. This is undoubtedly an important undertaking. My marriage to April is an important commitment that I cherish very much. We've been married for just over 8 years, and we have 2 wonderful boys, Chris and Charles. Chris is named after me, and Charles was named after my father. Our family lives in a cozy house which has enough space for our growing family. Despite the lack of higher education, I have achieved success as a qualified mechanic, which allows me to provide a good life for my loved ones through hard work and dedication. Although my job requires long hours, the financial stability it brings makes it all worthwhile. I have always viewed my marriage as the pinnacle of my life, making selfless efforts to provide for my family. I considered this duty extremely important and approached it with all seriousness. But eventually, my marriage broke down due to minor circumstances. In my case, it was a tiny blood vessel in the brain that turned out to be too close to another vessel. As a result, the vessel swelled and came into contact with another, which led to debilitating headaches in the form of migraines. It was during one of these attacks that everything changed on that fateful day. The familiar symptoms reappeared, the bright light was unbearable, the sounds grew louder, and the smells were overwhelming. Without any warning, a sharp pain shot through me, and I realized that a migraine was imminent. Unfortunately, I had forgotten the Imitrex inhaler, which was my main remedy for relieving the condition. The pills I had on hand were not as effective and would have taken too long to provide significant relief. The pain was getting worse, and I realized that I would not be able to work properly until the migraine subsided. I went into my boss's office and told him the sad news. He was immediately alarmed and instructed his secretary, Penny, to help me get home and make sure that I did not drive in my current state. Penny kindly helped me to my feet, and together with the boss, they led me out of the office and down the hall to the exit. Once outside, Penny supported me as I leaned against the wall, shielding my eyes from the light and putting my hands to my temples to ease the headache. I pressed my hands to my temples. The pain was almost unbearable. Sitting in the car seat, I tightly closed my eyes, trying to shut out everything around me. The pain increased, making it difficult to see clearly. The bright light outside forced me to keep my eyes closed, the sounds were deafening in my head, and the smell was nauseating, making my stomach flinch. Penny knew my address, so I didn't have to give her directions. While she was driving, the ride seemed to drag on endlessly. Finally, she stopped, got out of the car, and opened my door to help me out. I obediently followed her example as she led me inside. Penny led me into the kitchen and told me to open the refrigerator to get my inhaler. She found it, handed it to me, and supported me while I administered the medicine. When I inhaled the aerosol, it quickly passed through my lungs and entered my bloodstream. I asked her to take me into the living room adjacent to the kitchen and help me recline on the sofa, instructing her to close all the blinds and turn off the lights. She complied with my request and waited until I felt relieved before leaving. After expressing gratitude for her taking me home, I fell into the silence that followed her departure. When the pain began to decrease, I must have fallen asleep quickly because after a while, I woke up to the sound of voices in a dimly lit room, indicating that it was already late in the day. When I came to my senses, I realized that the pain had disappeared. It seemed to me that I had been through a difficult ordeal, but it was just the lingering effects of a migraine. I sat down carefully and waited to make sure the pain didn't come back unexpectedly. While I was sitting in the dark, I heard the voices of my wife April and her neighbor Robin. They didn't seem to be aware of my presence, as the room remained dimly lit and the lights were off. God bless me, April must have let me oversleep, thinking I'd come home early. But when I looked outside, my car wasn't in the driveway. Maybe she didn't even know I was here. Maybe I can surprise them both. As I prepared to sneak to the door, I listened to their conversation. "Come on, April, how did it go?" one of them asked impatiently. "Was everything as good as before? Tell me all the details." April replied enthusiastically, "It was fantastic. I felt like I was in heaven. This time, it was even better than before. I can't believe it, it was just incredible. It was the most amazing experience I've ever had, even better than with Chris, better than with your husband. Damn, that was amazing. I adore Chris, but he never made me feel that way. Never. I've never let him do that kind of thing to me. He would have judged me harshly. But Carl must think you're loose." "Well, he thinks so, but I'm his love toy and I like it. Oh my God, I'm looking forward to our next meeting. Are you worried about the possibility that Chris will find out our secret? Have you thought about the possible consequences? It's a risky situation, but I believe Chris will never find out. And even if he does, I don't think he'll take any drastic measures. He's a kind and forgiving man. He values our family too much to risk losing it. He knows that I would never jeopardize the well-being of our children. I only need a ruthless lawyer to get him fired. This is not typical of you, April. I've never heard you talk about Chris like that. How can you claim to love him and still make such statements? It's disturbing, girl. I think you're making a serious mistake. I sincerely want to warn you. I love Chris, true, but I also don't want to lose what I have with Carl. I want both. I need the physical intimacy that I share with Carl and the emotional connection with Chris. I need both. I didn't want to give up. I've reached my limit. Although the migraine had subsided, the pain in my heart was unbearable. The intensity of the pain made my stomach clench and my breath catch in my throat. My ears were ringing and blood was pounding in my head. Fear crept up. I was afraid that I might have a heart attack. I pressed myself against the door frame to support myself until I began to regain some semblance of composure. Despite my inner turmoil, I remained inconspicuous. But as I regained control of my emotions, my anger grew, and I felt like a bomb about to explode. Summoning all my resolve, I stood up straight, raised my head, and stepped into the brightly lit kitchen. Robin noticed me first, and there was silence in the room as she looked up in disbelief. Her eyes widened, her mouth opened, and she gasped softly, covering her mouth with her hand. April, sensing the shift in attention, turned around and saw me standing there. The satisfaction on her face was quickly replaced by surprise at my unexpected presence. I stood up straight, raised my head, and stepped into the kitchen light. Robin's reaction was instantaneous. As soon as she noticed me, silence fell in the room. She raised her head, her eyes widened, and her mouth fell open in surprise. She raised her hand to her lips and sighed softly. April, noticing Robin's reaction, turned to see what had caught her attention. Her expression changed from pleased to incredulous when she saw me standing there. In an instant, she went from fear to anger, pushing back her chair. She stood up and turned to me, demanding, "How much have you heard? Why were you hiding and spying on me?" I was silent, looking at Robin, who quickly stood up and announced, "It's time for me to leave. Pete and I will look after the boys until you come for them. I'll call you later." With that, she hurried out the side door. I stood in silence while she left without saying a word. When she left, my gaze returned to April, the woman I had adored with all my heart for the past 8 years. These 8 years were filled with nothing but joy and happiness, and I believed that we would spend the rest of our lives together. But now, that dream lay in ruins. Our eternity was shattered by April's actions that night. And as I stood there, mourning what might have been, I couldn't help but wonder, where were our 2 sons when you were having fun with your lover? Did you think about him, or were you too absorbed in the pleasure of communicating with another, neglecting his feelings? Now I felt collected and balanced, but the pain still did not subside. It was acute and enduring. It would take time for this pain to subside. April's expression was filled with anger, turning her beauty into something unrecognizable. Perhaps this was the real April who had been hiding under the surface all this time. Turning around, she said, "The boys were with the neighbors." Robin and I went shopping, and Pete looked after them. She made it clear that she was only with Robin and no one else, and she felt like a winner. The anger on her face was replaced by satisfaction. Then she realized that I had been at home all this time and asked why I was at home, where my car was, and why I was sitting in the dark. She asked if I was spying on her, trying to catch her doing something. I arrived home earlier than I expected, suffering from severe migraines. George asked Penny to take me back, as I couldn't stand the light. After taking Imitrex, I fell asleep and have been at home ever since. Suddenly, a wave of nausea swept over me, forcing me to rush to the bathroom. Your conversation woke me up, and its content made me feel sick. I need to go to the bathroom right away. That's why I rushed into the bathroom, trying to push the contents of my stomach out through my mouth. Despite all my efforts, it failed, but my body certainly made the attempt. I sat down on the cool bathroom floor, leaned my face against the porcelain, and began to relax gradually. Eventually, my rebellious stomach calmed down, and my breathing returned to normal. The sweat on my face dried up, and the nausea was passing. After a few minutes, I got up, sprinkled water on my face, and rinsed my mouth. When the shaking subsided and I came to my senses a little, I returned to the kitchen where April was sitting and looking out the window. I'm going to pick up the boys and put them to bed tonight, I announced, walking past her and out the door, heading for the Anderson house next door. Pete and Robin Anderson were our closest neighbors and closest friends. We often spent evenings together chatting and enjoying drinks. It hurt me to admit it, but they really were our best friends. I was curious about what Pete knew, and I realized I should have just asked him. When I reached the back door, I knocked several times before entering. Robin was in the kitchen, sipping coffee and chatting with her husband. She seemed to have already informed him of something. When I walked in, he looked at me with a sympathetic expression, while Robin looked scared. I mentioned that I had come to pick up the boys and asked if they were ready to leave. Without waiting for an answer, I headed into the living room, letting Pete pass on the way. I assumed the boys were playing with Carly, their teenage daughter. When I entered the room, I saw that they were solving a puzzle together, and Carly was watching them. She greeted me with a smile and stood up, asking if I had come for them. When I nodded, she said she would bring their jackets. Watching their conversation, I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. Scenes like this, I suspected, were victims of infidelity, the simple joys that once filled the family with happiness now overshadowed by the selfish actions of adults that caused irreparable damage. It seemed that this situation was no exception. "Thanks, Carly," I said and went into the kitchen. Pete and Robin stayed where they were, and I couldn't help but wonder if they knew the truth. "Did you hear that she cheated on me, Pete? Did you not care? Did it hurt you? Did it bring you any satisfaction?" I asked, my words filled with anger and pain. I needed to know what my friends knew. I should have known. Pete's face reflected his own anger as he replied, "I didn't know anything, buddy. To be honest, if I had known, I would have told you right away." Pete was shocked to learn that his wife knew about the secret and hid it from him. He felt betrayed and hurt by her actions. It was a disgusting act that he couldn't bring himself to apologize for. Despite his anger at his wife, he made it clear that he would be there for me. When he looked at his wife, there was anger and disappointment in his eyes. He couldn't believe she had known about it all this time. After thinking about the situation, I realized that Robin and April had played a cruel joke on me, making me look like a fool, cuckolded, and weak. Catching sight of Carly out of the corner of my eye, I forced myself to smile as the boys left the house, each holding a cookie in their hands. I hoped she hadn't heard my earlier remarks, but her expression said otherwise. This was Robin's last meeting with my children. I have set a goal for myself. I will do it, and even though I didn't know how to do it, I was determined to try. We entered the house through the back door, where the boys immediately rushed upstairs to change for dinner. I walked through the deserted kitchen into the living room and found April sitting in a dimly lit room. She left the light on, a contrast to the darkness that enveloped both of us as we pondered the uncertainties ahead. Having taken measures, I turned on the lamp on the side table and closed the curtains, letting in the last remnants of daylight. The room was shrouded in shadows, and the dark corners seemed to symbolize the hidden secrets my wife kept. April looked haggard and disheveled, her eyes were red and glistening with tears, her face pale and worn, her shoulders hunched. The anger and defiance that had once defined her had disappeared, leaving behind a terrified woman. But it was too little and too late for me. Instead of hope, I was filled with disgust. Did she feel regret at that moment? Was she scared? It was hard for me to believe that such a significant change could happen in just 10 minutes. No, this was just the beginning of the struggle for dominance. She was an unfaithful wife who kept secrets and hid her infidelity from me. Her expression was one of deception and cunning, not remorse. When I looked at her, the first question that came to my mind was, who is he? What does he have that I don't? She stared at me in silence, and I didn't know if she would answer at all. When I was about to leave, she said, "It doesn't matter who he is, and it's not your concern, Chris. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I didn't want you to find out the truth or hurt you. I'm sorry you overheard my conversation with Robin. Please try to understand, this is very important." It was strange that there were no words of regret or apologies for these actions. "I'm sorry that this happened. I promise it won't happen again," sinking into the plush armchair she gave me for our 5th wedding anniversary. I couldn't help but feel the gravity of the situation. Although I still cherished this chair, now it had acquired a different meaning. "Please give me a chance to explain everything. It doesn't have to be the end for us. We can move on and continue to live in the same loving spirit as before. Let's figure this out together." She looked at me with a desperate look that I recognized from past encounters, usually when she asked for something I disapproved of. "Can you just try to understand?" she begged. "Can you assure me that it's over? Can you swear to me that you won't see or be with him anymore? Will you do that for me?" I remained calm. My body was tense, my hands gripping the arms of the chair tightly, maintaining my composure. April was looking at me, tears streaming down her face, her eyes wide open. She was silent, but her expression spoke for itself. She was determined to get her way and not give up until the end. I had heard her talking to Robin, and it was clear that she wouldn't let me stand in her way. It was obvious that she wanted me to agree with her. That's what I said. "After dinner, I'll put the boys to bed, and we'll discuss our options tomorrow. I'll start gathering my things to move out of the house. I've decided to stay with my brother for a while." Leaving the room, I headed for the kitchen, finding solace in its familiarity. In difficult times, it's curious how the kitchen becomes a refuge. As I navigated the chaos of my crumbling world, an unusual thought occurred to me. April busied herself with cooking dinner while I entertained the boys in the playroom, enjoying their carefree joy for an hour or so. While we were playing, April interrupted us for dinner. We sat down at the table together, and I hurried the boys to wash up in the bathroom. It was routine to get them settled for dinner. That evening's dinner was lively. The boys chatted and laughed, enjoying the food in each other's company. Their parents, on the other hand, sat in silence, lost in their own thoughts, reflecting on the consequences and the choices that had to be made. It's interesting to think about the transition from childhood to adulthood, what attracts children to growing up so much. Perhaps it's the alluring freedom and independence that adults seem to possess, without a full understanding of the responsibilities and consequences that follow. Children may perceive adults' decision-making processes as carefree and rule-free, without realizing the seriousness of these choices. As we grow older, we begin to understand the complexity of adult life and the importance of conscious choice. But not everyone grasps this concept, and some continue to live without fully realizing the consequences of their actions. April, like some others, considers freedom unlimited, ignoring the consequences of her actions and disregarding rules. After dinner, while I took the boys upstairs to bed, April dutifully washed the dishes and tidied up the kitchen. We chatted and read fairy tales for an hour until the boys calmed down and let me put them to bed. Standing at the door to their room, I dimmed the lights and watched them sleep peacefully under the covers, preparing for bed where endless possibilities and exciting new experiences awaited them. My eyes watered, and my throat tightened with sadness as I looked at them. This moment was also coming to an end. Sitting in the armchair downstairs, I grasped at something to hold on to because it seemed to me that my world was collapsing around me, slipping through my fingers, and there was no way to stop it. My love for April was deep and unshakable. As I waited in the dark, unable to shake off the words I had just heard, a heavy feeling settled in my chest. He has never made me feel like this, and I am his toy, the words echoed in my mind, evoking a deep sense of betrayal. I realized that at that moment, there was no turning back, and the love I once felt inside me seemed to be fading. At that moment, April entered the room and sat down in an armchair with a solemn expression on her face. "We need to talk," she began, her voice soft but firm. "I know you're upset, but you have to understand." The weight of her words hung in the air, leaving me to reflect on the harsh reality of the situation. My relationship with Carl is purely physical, a sensation, a feeling of something new. I know this infatuation will soon fade away, but for now, I can't break away from it. This feeling attracts me to him, but it does not change my love for you. I really care about you, not him. He's just a temporary distraction. This phase will pass, and we can return to what was before. You just have to believe that everything will work out. Her words flowed easily, but I hardly understood what she was talking about. Will I really be able to accept it? I can't shake the feeling that I want to see him all the time. Should I let this go on? Was she crazy, or was I just imagining things? Whatever it was, it had to stop. It seems like you're the only one who doesn't understand the reality of the situation. There's no us or we now, it's just you and him. Our relationship is over. There's no room for negotiation here, and I will never settle for less. After being married to me for the last 8 years, you must understand that I will never agree to your affair, Chris. I love you, and you're the only man I've ever loved. I don't like Carl, and I hope you can understand that. Please give me some time to figure this out for the sake of our marriage and our family. Please, give me this time. Take as much time as you need. I will contact my lawyer tomorrow. Let's split everything equally. I don't want to hurt you like you hurt me. I just want it to be over. I was emotionally exhausted and just wanted to rest and escape. The headache disappeared, but the pain in my heart remained. I just wanted to forget myself for a few hours, but what happened next took me by surprise. No way. We're not getting divorced. I will resist at every step and will definitely demand my share. I will do everything to prevent you from getting custody of the boys, and I will limit your visitation rights as much as I can. If you don't comply with my demands, it will cost you dearly. And Carl will still stay with me. You can't stop me, remember that. Absorbing these words, I realized that this marriage had long been over. This level of anger and disrespect was not a spontaneous outburst but rather a calculated and premeditated decision. She didn't show any concern for my feelings. If she was worried, she would never have behaved so offensively. She could have stopped everything before it even started, but instead, she expected me to find out the truth, and instead of stopping, she decided to hurt me as much as possible. There was no love in her actions, only selfishness and a desire to shame and offend me. As I watched her, my anger intensified, and I could tell by the look on her face that she had crossed the line. Her words were filled with venom, turning satisfaction into fear inside me. And then I said, I have to tell you something, April. If you corner a rat, it will resist. It will fight to the end until it loses its chance to escape. You should have realized that before you pushed me, but you did it, and now you have to face the consequences. I don't want to do this, Chris, but I have no other choice. You are very dear to me, and I will do everything possible so that you do not leave our family. If you refuse to admit and accept this, I will stand my ground. In the end, you will have no choice but to stay by my side. I understand that your love for me and our children is too strong for you to leave. I know you well, Chris. You're not leaving. Goodbye, April. Please tell the boys that I will visit them whenever I can. I'll pack some things quickly before I leave. The remaining items can be picked up at the agreed time. I hurried upstairs and hastily packed a bag with the most necessary things to last for a day or two, nothing extravagant, just items from the bathroom, a few pairs of underwear, jeans, and socks. After 8 years of marriage, there was nothing to take with me but bitter memories. But my 2 sons were the only things that mattered to me at that moment. When I came down the stairs, I found April sitting in the kitchen near the door, looking like she was ready to try again. Chris, please, I'm begging you, don't do this. Just tell me you're done with him. Promise me you'll never see him again. Maybe then we'll have a chance. I can't stand it, please. I pushed her away, fighting the urge to lash out at her in anger. I knew I had to control myself. I will come in the evenings after work so that the children won't immediately suspect anything. After leaving through the door, I threw my bag onto the back seat and got into the car. The door slammed shut. I drove out of the garage and hit the road. I took out my cell phone and dialed my brother Clyde's number. He lived nearby. Since his wife left him for another man 2 years ago, Clyde had been living alone with no idea of her whereabouts. Despite no longer caring, he was too depressed to take any action, and they were still legally married. Clyde refused to be persuaded, considering himself an avid alcoholic, often indulging in late-night drinking with friends. Despite my attempts to reason with him, Clyde remained steadfast in his habits. It is worth noting that he rarely reached a state of intoxication, preferring to maintain a constant level of inebriation. I suspected alcohol helped him cope with his past wounds, although this was only my assumption. Despite this, Clyde still valued our conversations and invited me to his house. He assured me he would return later, and I headed there. I retrieved the key from its hiding place under the flower pot on the porch and entered the house, as I had done many times before. Everything looked immaculate. Clyde was tidy, a trait that had always remained unchanged and was reassuring to see now. Following his suggestion, I took several bottles of beer from the refrigerator and made myself comfortable. By the time he returned, I was already feeling tipsy. He went to the store for beer, and we continued drinking. When Clyde got home, I confided in him about the fight with April. In a sign of support, he sat down at the table and finished the beer, trying to keep me from losing control. He assured me he was always there for me, like a brother. The next morning, I woke up feeling the effects of excessive drinking, a hangover and a splitting headache. I knew I was to blame for this, regardless of the reasons for my actions. I went into the bathroom and took a shower, trying to wash away the physical and emotional effects of the previous night. Standing under the cold water, I let it rinse away the remnants of drunkenness from my body. It was futile to remain hungover. I needed to find Clyde. I found a note saying he was at work and would contact me later. It wasn't surprising, we both had to work that Saturday. Clyde and I worked for a company that leased heavy construction equipment to various contractors across the state. Customers came from far and wide to get their equipment, and we were known as the two best mechanics. Our main responsibility was ensuring the equipment remained operational, despite the challenges the job presented. It paid well but demanded a lot of time, necessary to support my family. I understood the importance of earning enough to maintain the large house April treasured. I believed she shared my view of home as a symbol of security and the place where our family thrives. I took pride in my role as the breadwinner, seeing it as a way to demonstrate my love and dedication. However, her words from last night made me doubt whether she saw things the same way. April viewed it differently. It was a matter of security for her, but also a means of maintaining influence over me in case of a divorce. She wanted the house and the money I earned, but only to spend on luxury clothes for herself and trips to Victoria's Secret for her lover. Pouring more water to drown out these troubling thoughts, despite being behind schedule, I realized I needed to leave for work, where I could clear my mind, strategize, and make decisions, something I couldn't focus on at the moment. April had thought of everything. Her words from last night made it clear she had meticulously planned this betrayal. Anticipating my shock and confusion upon discovery, she knew I would be emotionally devastated and unable to think clearly. She had carefully laid out every detail in advance, her divorce strategy aimed at leaving me devastated, deprived of everything, including custody of our children, and framing me as the villain in this situation if I dared express disapproval of her infidelity. She considered herself cunning, not wanting to jeopardize her luck due to an envious husband. Quickly packing, I grabbed a box and heavy-duty garbage bags, anticipating she would leave with the children in the morning to her mother's. I drove up to the house and entered. I emptied the closets and drawers, throwing everything into trash bags. After collecting the necessary items from the bathroom, I packed them into a small bag and took them to the truck. I threw my bag onto the back seat and returned to the house. I had no intention of leaving immediately. Instead, I planned to come back after work and spend time with the kids. I had a lot to think about and many decisions to make. One thing was clear, my marriage was over, and I would never have anything to do with April again. She was someone else's partner now, not mine. She would never be my wife, lover, or confidant again. As I contemplated the situation, tears began to fill my eyes uncontrollably. I found myself sitting on the floor in a room that once belonged to both of us, crying. The pain of loss was overwhelming. To distract myself, I immersed myself in work, even skipping my lunch break to avoid distractions. I welcomed the opportunity to bury my emotions under the demands of my job, focusing on tasks such as repairing fuel injectors, timing chains, and fuel pumps. I tackled complex problems, from broken gearboxes to hydraulic lifts, taking on the most challenging tasks without hesitation. I was completely absorbed in my work for several hours until Clyde finally interrupted me, urging me to take a break. "Come on, kid," he said. "You make everyone else look lazy." He looked at me with a shocked expression on his face, and I apologized, explaining that I was trying to distract myself from what I wanted to forget. I must have been on the verge of tears when Clyde gently led me away from the stairs to the recreation area. Clyde and I had grown close after our parents died in a car accident 10 years ago. He was the best man at my wedding 8 years ago and took on the role of godfather to my sons, Chris Jr. and Charlie. When I sat down at the table and stared into space, Clyde returned with 2 steaming cups of coffee. The taste was bland, but the warmth was soothing. I poured out my heart, recounting all the details of April's betrayal. I couldn't help but talk about the shame, humiliation, and contempt I felt at her hands. I told Clyde about her threats to manipulate and control me, preventing me from thwarting her perverse plans. April had done everything in her power to ensure I couldn't take any action against her without sacrificing everything dear to me. It was a calculated move that made me feel trapped and powerless. But as I spoke, a weight seemed to lift from my shoulders, and finally, I found someone I could trust who truly listened and understood me. Clyde stood by my side, offering support and guidance as I navigated the murky waters of April's deception. Continuing the conversation, I realized I wasn't alone in this battle. I had a friend ready to help me through any difficulties. Then, Clyde asked about what she expected from me. I told him about the look on her face when she humiliated me in public, revealing intimate details about our life with Robin and the disdain she showed when she threatened to ruin me. She made it clear that her relationship with her lover took priority and that she wouldn't give him up. Clyde was shocked. He had always considered April a decent woman and caring mother. He had believed our marriage was solid, but now everything had changed. Clyde looked at me, noticing the deep suffering etched on my face. It was agonizing. I was a reliable father, a caring provider, and a loyal friend to the guys at the garage. I had always been there for them, going above and beyond. Anger boiled up in Clyde. He couldn't fathom how she could betray me like this. What was she thinking? "What's gotten into her, Chris?" he exclaimed. "Please, Chris, you can't just leave it like that," he urged. "We'll help you. We'll figure something out. This is unacceptable." His brother's eyes showed concern, his expression full of sympathy. I felt the warmth of his care. With a devastated expression, I asked, "What can I do? If I leave her, she'll take everything from me. I'll have to pay alimony, support her financially, provide everything our children need. I would never do anything to harm them. Unfortunately, she manipulates our children to hurt me, knowing I would never harm them. Now, this fool she's with is trying to take my place as their father, showing disrespect and thinking it's acceptable to have an affair with a married woman. I feel powerless in this situation." Clyde shook his head in disappointment, muttering, "To hell with both of them. It pains me to see April, whom I loved like a sister, behave so despicably. Now that she's come to terms with her situation, she'll have to face the consequences. We have to go after them. First, we need to find out who he is. That'll be easy. I'll make some phone calls. Then we can discuss our next steps." I just shrugged in response. "Okay, but I'm not sure I can help if she doesn't provide any information about him." "So what if she doesn't cooperate?" "We'll track him down and deal with him like any other target." "And you realize that April's return is out of the question now because of her actions, right? If you indulge her actions, she will lose all respect for you." "No way, my friend. She belongs to someone else now." At first, I was caught off guard, but then a grin appeared on my face. "You're right. She is no longer the woman I once loved. Last night showed me how quickly love can turn into hate, and my anger toward her now outweighs my affection for her. She took what we had and turned it into something that would eventually hurt her. I informed him of the situation, and we continued the conversation, finishing the job without overtime. We decided to go to the nearest small bar, not intending to get drunk because we had important things to do. Clyde contacted a few other people, and we gathered to brainstorm and come up with a plan. I was deeply touched by the support I received from my friends, who offered their help without hesitation and without asking any questions. Together, we were able to develop a solid plan. Arriving home at 7 o'clock in the evening, I parked at the entrance and entered the house. When I walked in, I felt uneasy. It was no longer my home but just a house. Taking off my jacket in the kitchen, I entered the living room where I found April sitting in an armchair, watching our 5-year-old twins Chris and Charlie playing a video game. I stood and looked at this scene, forever etched in my memory. April met my gaze while watching the children play. A faint smile appeared on her face, which I now perceived as a sign of her contempt for me and our family. It was a facade, a deception behind which she hid. In that moment, I finally saw through her pretense. Responding with a contemptuous look rather than a smile, I left, and she turned away. Entering the kitchen and opening the refrigerator, the full truth of her deception dawned on me. I microwaved what turned out to be leftover fried chicken and mashed potatoes, not because I was hungry but because I needed something to occupy my time. I had intended to talk to the boys before they went to bed, but Clyde convinced me to hold off. I reluctantly postponed this task for later, knowing that when I talked to them, it would mark the beginning of a battle that started back in April. I knew the odds were against me, but I was ready to fight to the end. Sitting down at the table with a plate of food, I began to eat slowly, lost in my thoughts. Despite the lack of taste, I forced myself to eat to maintain energy. I needed time to collect my thoughts, so I sat and slowly ate my food. About half an hour later, April came into the room and sat down across from me. I glanced at her briefly, then returned my attention to the food and began to eat intently. There was no conversation between us because at that moment, I had nothing to say to her. "Have you calmed down after last night? Can we have a civilized conversation now?" she asked. Instead of trying to figure out the situation, I chose to remain silent. "Chris, are you going to ignore me like a child? I had high hopes for you. We need to think about how this will affect our children. Are you really their father now? I can't get that thought out of my head. Maybe I should think about checking it out." "No need to get angry, just speak calmly," I interjected. April's expression turned sour with anger. When she was about to answer, I reminded her to lower her voice, noting that the children might overhear. I pointed out that the previous night, she accused me of forgetting about the children when I was upset, and now she needed to consider how her actions would impact their lives. "It wasn't just that you had a good time with someone else, you've caused a lot of harm to our family. Please think about your actions, April," I said. April paused, spoke in a softer tone, and whispered, "It seems like you didn't take my words seriously yesterday. I was hoping you'd find a way to forget about it and get back to our old relationship. Nothing will change at home. You're still dear to me, and you're still my husband. That hasn't changed. I conduct my activities in secret, waiting until the children are at school and you're at work to do my business. You have nothing to worry about because I'm always here for you." I remained silent, continuing to eat slowly and intently, keeping a neutral expression on my face and not reacting in any way. My gaze was blank when I met her eyes. As April sat there, the feeling that she was slowly sinking into herself permeated the room. For the first time, I noticed a slight tremor of fear pass through her body. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Are you going to make my life difficult? I thought you cared enough about me to give me time alone last night. I assured you that I didn't take anything away from you and that I'll always be here for you. Why can't you understand this, Chris?" April was becoming increasingly emotional, but I remained calm as I watched her. Slowly taking another bite of my food, after swallowing, I advised her to wait until the children were asleep before starting this conversation. I had listened to her the night before, even though I didn't agree with everything she said, and now it was her turn to wait. April seemed to understand and started smiling again, thanking me for the offer. She admitted, "You were right about some of the things you said. Your words hurt me. I'll take the boys upstairs soon, and then we can discuss this further, she said as she walked past me, her hand briefly resting on my shoulder. I instinctively recoiled, unable to hide my disgust at her touch. Despite trying to maintain a normal environment for the children, I struggled with the realization that everything was about to change. April's actions had ruined our relationship, and I wondered if I should just accept my role as a cuckold and agree to her terms. In the end, she told me that she still loved me and wanted to stay married, but deep down, I knew I couldn't go through with it. Not at this moment, not ever. April entered the room after 9 o'clock and sank into a chair with a heavy sigh, flashing a tired but satisfied smile. I just put the kids to bed, she said. They're already so big. They say they're going to bed, but I know they keep reading after I leave. I nodded in agreement. They really are good kids. It's a pity that they have to face such difficulties. I don't know how to alleviate their suffering. What do you mean? I thought you understood that nothing needs to change. Just give me what I want, and we can be the loving family we used to be again. Please, be patient. I promised that it would be over soon, and you wouldn't lose anything. I love you deeply, and I want to remain your wife. It's just something that needs to be done, and nothing more, she pleaded. I looked at the woman who had been my partner for the past 8 years. I married her because I couldn't imagine my life without her. We had 2 wonderful children and a strong marriage until everything changed last night. She couldn't understand why I felt it necessary to bring up the subject. I wasn't going to discuss it in detail tonight, but I needed to clarify the situation, April. I listened to you last night. You expressed your desires and confessed your love for me, wanting to remain my wife. You insisted that he didn't take anything away from me, I said. April's expression turned angry as she listened to my recounting of how I felt threatened by her the night before. Then I made it clear that in the event of a divorce, I intended to take everything from her, including the children. Despite her silence, it was obvious she was unhappy with our conversation. The words, although familiar, seemed more menacing when they came out of my mouth. She understood the validity of my words. But, Chris, you just can't look at this from my point of view, she explained. This situation has nothing to do with our marriage. But you refuse to listen. Why is it so hard for you to believe me when I tell you that I still love you and want our marriage to be strong? I countered. Last night, I felt nothing but contempt from you, April. Contempt for me and our marriage. When I expressed my displeasure, you reacted with deliberate threats, contempt for me after all the efforts I have put into our relationship over the years. You continue to humiliate, belittle, threaten, and accuse me of misunderstanding you. You knew how I would react, but you're acting like you've already decided what to do with me. Why are you so confident in your answers to all the questions? I felt anger rising in me as I realized she had overlooked something important the previous night. April, you once threatened me, cornered me, believing I had no way to escape. But I told you then, and I'll tell you now, even a rat will fight a cat if you corner it. I won't lose anything with that, I said, getting up and leaving. When I reached the kitchen where April was sitting, I stopped. I decided to stay the night somewhere else, returning home after work so the children wouldn't immediately notice something was wrong. Why did you decide to stay somewhere else instead of here? We won't be able to solve our problems if you're not here, Chris. Please, don't do this. You mean so much to me, and I don't want to lose you. I don't know how I'll cope if you leave. Please, let's go through this together. There must be a way to fix this, April pleaded. I'm really sorry, April. The only certainty I have right now is that my feelings for you have disappeared. Your betrayal last night destroyed all my love for you. That's the truth, I know. I don't know what to do next, but one thing is for sure, there's no way back, I replied. Chris, what happened to your promises to love and take care of me? Have you forgotten them? April asked. I clearly remember the vows you made on our wedding day. You promised to leave everyone and love only me. But you didn't keep your promise. Despite my care, love, and loyalty in our marriage, you chose to share what we had with someone else. It wasn't enough. You gave away what rightfully belonged to me to someone else, thereby destroying my love. After this betrayal, I can move on. You've completely destroyed my affection for you. I can leave, and I will do it." I left and went to Clyde's. He kindly allowed me to stay as long as necessary. I needed time to finish what I started. Soon, everything will be behind me, and I will be able to start all over again. In the days that followed, I focused on work and spent evenings with the children, avoiding further communication with April. She tried to start a conversation with me several times, but I always avoided it. Eventually, she raised her voice at me, but I just took the keys and left without answering anything. During a work break, one of the group members approached Clyde and informed him that the preparations had been completed and everything would be ready soon. All that remained was to wait patiently. The situation didn't change until the following week when I returned home every evening and found April becoming more and more worried. The kids didn't seem to notice anything unusual, but Charlie asked about my workload. Embarrassed, I asked for clarification, and he explained that he only sees his father briefly in the evenings. I assured him that we would find a solution. Over the weekend, Charlie looked pleased, and the small crisis was resolved. April kept asking me questions, but I chose to ignore her and left as soon as she took the kids upstairs to put them to bed. When she came back downstairs, I had already left. The week came to an end when Clyde entered the break room and sat down at the table. He handed me a folder. I gave him a puzzled look, but he just shook his head. Curious, I opened the folder and skimmed through the brief report it contained. It consisted of 2 pages, each with Carl Cummings' name at the top. Carl was a junior attorney at the law firm of Lincoln, Rhyme, and Holmes. At 24, he was almost 10 years younger than me and was currently single after a divorce 2 years ago. He must have been rich. He lived in an apartment, and April visited him twice that week, each time staying an hour or more. Now that I know his name and address, I have some idea who this person is, but I was puzzled by what qualities he possessed that April was willing to sacrifice our marriage for. However, I didn't care anymore. If April had confessed to me earlier, maybe things would have been different. I didn't just accept it as a fact that I should follow without asking questions. So, what's the next step? What do I need to do to get started? I turned to Clyde for advice. Despite being the one with the problem, it seemed to me that Clyde decided what to do on his own. I was grateful to have a friend and a brother like him. It seemed that being a good friend and making an effort at work was all that was required of real friends, and now I needed them more than ever. The gears were already turning. The first lesson is expected tonight. I will contact you at your place of residence when everything is ready. Please make sure that your mobile phone is at hand when I call. You can tell her about it and put an end to this situation. It's not ideal, but I felt trapped by April and her partner, and I had to resist in the only way I could, as a mechanic, not as someone with sufficient wealth to develop complex circuits. The realization of what needed to be done did not bring any satisfaction. In my life, I have been a selfless worker, always striving to do my best for my family in the only way I know, hard, honest work. I was proud of my ability to provide for loved ones, especially my deep love for my wife April, but she was unhappy with my efforts. Despite her displeasure, I remained steadfast in my plan, confident that she would soon understand everything. When I returned home in the evening, I joined the family for dinner as if nothing had happened. April talked to the children, and I answered their questions and even started a few conversations myself. Despite feeling anxious, I managed to hide my nerves. After dinner, I joined the kids playing video games and helping them with their homework. I embodied the role of a typical husband and father. When April finished washing the dishes, she went into the room to observe what was happening. She thought I was calmer today because I looked like my old self. She began to believe that eventually everything would fall into place. While I was playing with my sons, Carl Cummings left his workplace and headed for a car parked on the street. He was on his way to his apartment on the opposite side of the city, reflecting on the events with April. I couldn't help but recall an unexpected meeting that had taken place just 2 days earlier at his house. April showed new courage, fulfilling his every wish in a way she had never done before. It was only after she cleaned herself up that she revealed the reason for her sudden change in behavior. Her husband had discovered their secret affair. This revelation stunned Carl. He assured her that there was no need to worry. It seemed strange to me that her husband, knowing about her actions, only worsened her promiscuity. Doing things in bed was the best thing for them, so he dismissed all concerns. On the way to the parking lot where he left the car, he felt a sharp jolt and began to lose his balance. When he was trying to stand on his feet, someone grabbed his arms and dragged him towards the alley. He was dragged into the courtyard and pinned against the wall of the building. Carl felt the firm grip of two men on either side of him, their faces hidden by black ski masks. Their imposing figures filled him with fear, and he wondered what they might want from him. Having no money or valuables with him, Carl could not understand their motives. A third man, also wearing a mask and gloves, stood in front of him and forcefully lifted his chin. Hearing the name Carl felt a sudden chill and asked in a hoarse voice, "Oh no," he muttered, realizing the gravity of the situation. It's all about her husband, whom she never mentioned that he was so scary. In a panic, Carl denied knowing anyone by that name, trembling as he tried to dismiss the situation. The big man hit him in the ribs, causing excruciating pain and making him fear for his life. When the man began to ask him about April Phillips, the lie did not deceive the man, and Carl finally admitted that he knew her. Desperate thoughts raced through his mind, and he prayed to get out unharmed. The man warned him that he would never see her or speak to her again, and Carl understood. Maybe it was just a threat, he thought, trying to calm down. My friends, and I doubt that a man like you, who seduces married women, is smart. We want to make sure that you are fully aware of this. With that, they stopped pinning him to the wall. A powerful blow knocked him off his feet. The pain was so intense that he almost lost consciousness. Soon after, he blacked out. When he came to his senses, they made him memorize a few words, repeating them incessantly. He didn't remember anything else until he woke up in the emergency room of Memorial Hospital. Although his injuries were not critical, he was placed in the general care unit for further treatment. He was given a lot of medications and was in excruciating pain. Lying there, he silently prayed for survival. He was informed that she could contact him and instructed what to say. He clearly remembered the words he had to say to her: "I'm really sorry, Mrs. Phillips. I take full responsibility for my actions and feel deep remorse. I pledge to stop all communication with you and your family. I'm sorry that I ever crossed paths with you. Goodbye." Carl leaned back against the headboard, eagerly awaiting her call. He mentally repeated the instructions, reminding himself to avoid mistakes. The consequences of not fulfilling their demands haunted him. He vowed never to harass a married woman, regardless of her identity. When the clock struck 8 in the morning, my mobile phone rang, interrupting my thoughts, and I went out to answer the call in another room. While I was playing with the twins, Clyde's caller ID appeared on the screen. I answered the call. I heard a short message: "Everything is ready, the first lesson is over." I found out that my wife's lover was in the hospital. Before the end of the conversation, after hanging up, I put the phone away and returned to the living room smiling. April noticed my expression but didn't say anything. She smiled back, thinking it was good news. When April finally took the children upstairs, she gave me a questioning look. I assured her that I would be waiting for her. When she returned downstairs, she smiled warmly and got up to put the children to bed. I went into the living room, settled into an armchair, and waited patiently. The moment had come. April came into the room with a coffee pot and 2 cups in her hands. She offered to talk a little more, noting that I seemed to accept the situation. I was relieved to hear this from her because I was afraid of losing her, and the very thought of it broke my heart. I knew it was hard for her to believe, but I was sincerely grateful for her understanding. I adore you more than words can express. It breaks my heart to think that I could lose you over such a small thing. Our love is much stronger than any obstacles, I said, looking at her while she was talking. I still saw her beauty. She is a woman I have cherished for many years, and I imagined a future in which we would grow old together. But now, our plans and dreams are ruined. It's time to accept the inevitable end, April. I have something important to tell you. Please listen to me carefully, I continued. I know who your lover is, Carl Cummings, associate attorney at Lynn Cohen Rice & Holmes. I am well aware of him, and I know that you have met with him twice this week. April looked stunned and ready to speak, but I motioned for her to be quiet. That's the point. You used the threat of divorce against me. When I expressed my displeasure, you threatened to deprive me of everything I own. I remember your words clearly, they left an indelible mark on my mind. I explained, my voice filled with emotion. You said, "I'll take everything you have." You said a lot of hurtful words, but these are the ones that stayed with me. They were filled with contempt and eventually led to the collapse of our marriage. Those words were supposed to corner me, making me feel helpless as you pursued an intimate relationship with another man. The next night, I warned you that even a cornered rat would resist. I saw fear and pain begin to show on your face, but you had no idea what would happen next. Yet, she was smart enough to realize this wasn't what she wanted. Her shoulders tensed, and she instinctively lowered her head in defense. I know you told Robin that I never made you feel the way you felt with him. I'm not apologizing for the fact that everything has to end in a way that you won't appreciate. Mr. Cummings has been given to understand in no uncertain terms that his relationship with you is over. He will never look at you again or engage in any intimate acts with you. He was directly told that he was forbidden to communicate with you, and he agreed. I watched the shock and disbelief on her face as I continued. I will start the divorce process, but there will be no spousal support for you. I will file a lawsuit based on your infidelity. Our sons will be provided for with alimony so they have everything they need, as long as you fulfill your duties towards them. I will provide the necessary funds, but if you want something for yourself, you'll have to work hard. I will take care of all the paperwork and ensure proper maintenance. April stood up, her face flushed with anger. You must be crazy if you think I'm going to agree to this, she said. I'm going to make you regret this, just like I promised. Despite her fear, April continued to act defiantly. She intended to stick to her plan and bluff until the very end. Why don't you call Mr. Cummings right now? I asked. Let's see what he says. Or maybe you should call the hospital. Earlier, I received a call and was informed that he was in the emergency department at Memorial. I think he's already been hospitalized. Just call him on his mobile and find out how he feels. If necessary, you can use mine, since I already have his number. April asked in horror, What have you done? What did you do to Carl? Oh my God, Chris, what have you done? I was stunned by her accusations. Why are you even asking me? I've been at home with you all evening. I used to be at work, so I couldn't have done anything to anyone. Why do you suspect me of wrongdoing? You explicitly told me not to get involved in this situation. It's not my concern. My behavior bothered April because she had never seen me like this before. I used to be gentle and non-confrontational, never even raising my hand to discipline the children, always leaving that to her. But now, she saw me in a new light, cold, unyielding, with eyes devoid of emotion. April went into the next room, and I heard her talking on the phone. It was obvious she was shocked by the news. As she returned with tears streaming down her cheeks, she sank into a chair, falling into oblivion. I remained calm and picked up the newspaper, realizing that she had just found out about it on the phone. Her partner was going to break off the relationship because he was threatened with violence by 3 men who intercepted him after work that day. They explained the reasons for his condition and the consequences if he started talking to April again. They wanted to ensure he understood the gravity of the situation. Wiping away her tears and taking a deep breath, April turned to me and admitted defeat. Admitting that I had won, Carl informed me that he did not want to see me anymore and that my things would be returned to me. He stated that he does not intend to talk to me in the future. In response, I assured him that I had a legal representative and would behave accordingly. I'm going to have to act quickly to fix this, I said, putting down the newspaper. I got up and prepared to leave. This weekend, I will talk to the boys about our upcoming divorce. I hope they're old enough to understand. If not, they will in time. As I was leaving, I looked back and saw April crying. I remembered her assurances that our breakup would be short-lived and that everything would return to normal soon. A bitter, angry laugh escaped my lips as I said, You're still young and beautiful, April. Perhaps you will find someone who will indulge your vicious fantasies, someone who wants an open marriage that allows you to deal with as many men as you want. Of course, I will never be able to live up to this lifestyle, but it's just me. I wish you good luck. Children may not understand this, but we adults do. We have to face the consequences of our choices, and unfortunately, those consequences can be terrible. A month later, we officially divorced. The divorce was quick, and my unfaithful wife was in a depressed state. She constantly cried and asked for forgiveness, but it was already too late. I wanted her to find a man who wanted an open relationship. After the divorce, April constantly forgot to pick up the children from kindergarten and drank a lot of alcohol. Our children did not feel her love and care and often told me that their mother did not love them. 2 years have passed, and now I am living with a beautiful woman who is 5 years younger than me and very attached to my children. April was not doing a good job raising the twins, and as a result, I gained full custody of the children. Now the 4 of us live in a big house where the children are happy with Anna and me. As for April, she looks very bad. The bruises under her eyes indicate that she continues to drink a lot of alcohol. Pete said that he often sees her with different men. Apparently, no one wants to build a serious relationship with such a promiscuous woman. Story 2. The weather in mid-Ohio was terrible that winter day. A strong wind blew from the northwest, blowing snow everywhere. I didn't feel well. I had caught the flu. As a carpenter, I had been working a lot of overtime lately, trying to save enough money to take our kids to Panama City, Florida, for spring break. Since we bought the big new house my wife insisted on a couple of years ago, money has been tight. I was looking forward to relaxing and enjoying watching college students on the beach during family vacations, but today I felt terrible. I had a headache, a high fever, and with the bad weather, I decided to leave work early. When the foreman saw me, he insisted that I go home before I got even worse. Grateful for the care, I quickly drove away in my truck. Although I thought about calling my wife, I was too exhausted to do so. Before I continue, let me briefly tell you about myself. My name is Ron Harding. I am 36 years old, of medium height, the weight of a strong man, maybe a little heavy, but I like to drink beer and relax when I'm not at work. My hair is starting to thin out, but I'm not looking for new romantic prospects, so what's the difference? My heart belongs to Nellie, short for Nell, my wife, with whom I have lived for 6 years. We met at school and tied the knot after graduation. After graduation, my wife and I moved in with my parents to start family life. Fortunately, they had a spacious old house with enough space for us. Nell and my mother got along well, which made our lives quite bearable. My father helped me get a job as a carpenter, where I mastered this craft. Now Nell works part-time in a doctor's office, keeping medical records and processing insurance statements 3 days a week, bringing additional income to our family. Although Nellie is not glamorous, she is a wonderful woman. Nellie is of medium height and full build. Like me, she has a little extra weight, but she wears it well. Despite the fact that she has 2 children, she retains an attractive appearance, which still ignites desire in me. Our children Brad and Angie are now 15 and 13 years old respectively. Both study well and behave decently. As a family, we found a balance. I took on the role of a teacher and Nell took on the role of a student. The day turned out to be cloudy, and I returned home early in the morning around noon, feeling absolutely terrible. All I could think about was getting home, taking a long hot shower, and then drinking some NyQuil with aspirin and falling into bed. Fortunately, Nell had the day off, and I hoped that she would take care of me, although I did not want to pass on my illness to her. When I pulled into the garage, I noticed that our car was gone but assumed that Nell had gone shopping. Closing the garage door, I headed inside and went up to our bedroom, wanting to finally relax in the shower. I was looking forward to the hot water washing my tired body. When I entered the bedroom, I couldn't help but notice that the usually neat bed was left unmade. This was unusual given Nell's strict standards of cleanliness. Ignoring the mess, I started to undress and casually threw my clothes on the floor. But my attention was quickly drawn to wet spots on the uncovered bottom sheet of the bed, peeking out from under the crumpled top sheet and blanket. Curious, I cautiously reached out and touched the wet, sticky residue. I put my finger to my nose and was stunned by the smell of female fluid. Oh no, I thought. I'm not mistaken, it couldn't have been my own scent because we hadn't been intimate for several days. Moreover, it's been over a week since we last shared a bed. Exhausted from overtime, I was too drained to do anything else but eat and sleep when I got home. My head was spinning because of the high fever and headache, so I couldn't think straight. I decided to take a shower, drink medicine, and rest until I could properly assess this alarming situation. I felt more frustrated and angry by the minute. As I went to the shower to let the hot water soothe my chilled body, despite the soothing warmth, the anxiety still wouldn't leave me. After drying off and changing into my pajamas, I took an aspirin and drank a sip of NyQuil, after which I moved my things from our bedroom to the guest room located at the end of the corridor. Just as I was finishing work, I heard the garage door open, which meant that she was coming home, and a confrontation was imminent. Voices were heard in the kitchen. I noticed that someone was with her as she walked up the stairs with quick, light steps. "Oh, you're home," she said, turning pale and staggering when she saw me carrying clothes down the hall. "I had to rush to school because Brad got sick," she replied. "Are you feeling well?" I shook my head. "No, I'm sick too. I'm going to sleep." As I was walking down the hall, she asked, "What's going on? Don't you sleep in our bed?" I explained, "No, I don't want you to get sick, and I know you don't want to pass this on to your lover." Shock immediately showed on her face. "What do you mean? Just go and look at the bed now and tell me that's not what I think is on the sheet." "Oh no, oh my God, I didn't want you to find this, but I had to hurry to school." "What are you going to do?" she asked, leaning against the wall, her face bathed in tears and suffering. "I'm not going to do anything until I figure it out." "I'm caught off guard, but you better be ready to explain everything and give me answers when I'm ready to deal with it," I told her, heading to the guest room. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I'm going to my room. I will never sleep in that bed again. You can keep it for your lover, but be ready to tell me his name. Please don't call me cute. You broke our wedding vows, and our marriage is over. I'm going to sleep here until I decide what to do." When I closed the door and climbed into the guest bed, all I heard was, "Oh my God, oh my God." The next moment, I woke up in the dark, reaching for the spot on the bed where Nell usually slept. I found it empty. Gradually, it dawned on me where I was and why. Sighing softly, I sat up, feeling hungry. I put on a robe and quietly went down to the kitchen. Turning on the light, I saw that it was 2 o'clock in the morning. I found leftovers in the fridge, warmed them up in the microwave, and sat down to eat. While I was enjoying my meal, a noise outside the door interrupted my thoughts. I looked up and saw Nell standing in her nightgown, her eyes red as if she had been crying. "I heard you coming down. Are you feeling well enough to talk already?" she asked. "Yes, we can talk. Are you ready to tell me about it?" I replied. "I'll try. I think I know who it is, but why don't you confirm it?" Nell hesitated. "I don't think I can tell you that." I sighed. "Then there's nothing to talk about, right? I'll leave right away." Nell begged, "Please, Ron. It's John." I raised an eyebrow. "I suppose you mean Dr. John Clemens?" "Yes," she confirmed. "How long has this been going on?" "About 6 weeks." "Do you have feelings for him?" "I'm not sure." "You're not sure, and you were intimate with him in our bed?" "The bed where we created our children, where I believed we shared our love, but now I doubt they're really mine. I need to express my pain." "Oh no, Ron, please don't think like that. Is this affair over?" "I'm not sure." "You're not sure?" I shouted. "Please, Ron, keep it down. You'll wake up the kids." "I still don't know." "So, you want to get a divorce?" "No, I still have feelings for you." "Do you really think I'm just going to sit and watch you date someone else?" "Ron, I want you to know that yesterday after you went to bed, I talked to a lawyer. He warned me that a divorce in this state would cost you a lot. You will not only have to cover the costs of the divorce itself, but also pay alimony and support the children. In addition, you will most likely lose custody of our children. I think it would be better if I'm allowed to continue seeing John until we finally break up." Having expressed her position, she sat calmly and evenly. I looked at her with shock and growing anger. Through clenched teeth, I asked her, "Do you really think I'm going to stand by and let you continue this affair and exhaust myself by supporting you in this lifestyle? Is that your final decision on this matter? On reflection, you will most likely realize that you don't have many alternatives. I am firmly convinced that this is exactly my position on this issue." My anger was palpable as I reacted to this situation. Therefore, I've decided to contact a lawyer tomorrow to explore the possibility of getting a second opinion about my capabilities. Take some time to think, and tomorrow evening I will give you my answer. Does that suit you? I want you to understand that you are still deeply dear to me, and I hope you will allow me to continue this short novel, because that's all there is after all is said and done. I'll be back in a few weeks, ready to be your spouse again. Let me be clear, I told her. I will not tolerate this in any case. How can you expect me to forgive you and trust you again after you betrayed our marriage vows and committed infidelity? Have you neglected the sacred obligation that we whimsically gave to God? And now you expect me to believe that you will never repeat this mistake? I don't think so. I was hoping that we could resolve this situation like adults, with reason and understanding. But it seems that you've decided to be stubborn. So, go to your lawyer tomorrow and see what he advises you. Maybe then you'll come to your senses. I'm already going to bed. Don't forget that we've been married for 16 years, and you should already know me well. Do you really believe that I will agree with your decision? Good night. With that, she left without waiting for an answer, leaving me to ponder my predicament. By 4 o'clock in the morning, I had a clear plan in my head. All that remained was to consult with a lawyer and my parents to bring it to life. Determined, I went back to bed. The next morning came quickly. I woke up around 9 a.m. and immediately began to put my plans into practice. The children were already at school, and Nell had gone to work. My first task was to schedule an appointment with a divorce lawyer for the afternoon. After breakfast, I visited my parents and had a heart-to-heart talk with them about the current situation. They were shocked by Nell's actions but agreed with the need for my decision and promised to support me. Their daughter's act plunged them into shock and confusion, affecting the whole family. After leaving them, I immediately took action. I contacted our insurance agents and family lawyer to make the necessary changes to the policy and will. Before going to the bank, I also talked to my boss, which made the day eventful and ended with a last phone call. Having prepared for the meeting with Nell and given an answer, I began to transport things to my old truck, waiting for the children to return from school. When Brad and Angie returned home, we sat down in the living room to have a heart-to-heart talk. I realized they were already old enough, and I told them about their mother's actions. They were surprised and confused. I explained in detail about the upcoming events, knowing it would hurt them to hear it, but they understood everything. I assured them that they would be taken care of no matter what happened and then took them to their grandparents' house until Nell returned. Nell returned home at her usual time and came into the kitchen to find me sitting at the table, waiting for her. "Didn't you go to work today?" she asked. "I had to complete several tasks," I said. She just shrugged, took off her coat, hung it on the hanger, and then stood in front of me. "Where are the children?" she asked. "They're at my parents' house," I replied. "Have you thought about what we talked about last night?" she asked. "Yes, I have. Today, I even met with a divorce lawyer who confirmed your words about my responsibilities in the event of a divorce," I confessed. "So it's all settled. You'll let me fool around a bit, and we can move on," she offered. "No," I replied firmly. "Do you remember when I told you that I would not tolerate you sitting here and supporting me while I was being cheated on? I came up with another plan," I said. "Which one exactly?" she asked, looking puzzled. "I will not divorce you," I assured her. Her face lit up with a smile. "How are you going to avoid divorcing me?" "Well, although I suspect that I may have been cheated on, I don't think the same will happen to John. I talked to his wife today and informed her about the current situation. I don't think he'll have a job tomorrow." "Oh no," she sighed. "I quit my job and am now unemployed." Her eyes widened in shock. "Are you crazy? How will we survive?" "I think you should be asking yourself that question. How will you survive?" I asked. "What do you mean?" "I'm leaving you. I don't want a divorce, but if you do, then you'll have to bear the costs yourself. You can refer to the fact that you were abandoned." "What about the children?" "My parents have agreed to take care of them if you can't provide for them. You may have to give up custody of them in order to provide them with health insurance. I have already discussed with both your parents and mine about your recent affair and the selfish offer you made. It looks like you're not on the best of terms with any of them right now. "How could you make such a decision?" she asked. "If you decide to leave me and the children, I will not hesitate to go to court," she added the last statement. "Afterward, feel free to do what you want. I will be far away from here, and even if you try to find me with the help of hired assistants, I doubt that you will have the means to do so. Even if you manage to find me, the court will not be able to force me to work against my will. Therefore, now you are instructed to deal with the mortgage payments for the car and new furniture, which you insisted on buying. I spent half of my savings on a trip to Florida, so I'm leaving you my last salary, which will be automatically transferred to our shared checking account. In addition, I changed my will and insurance policies, specifying the children as beneficiaries of all funds received from them. You will not receive any part of these assets. When you decide to sell this house, you'll find that the mortgage and closing costs will eat up most of our accumulated capital. You are disappointing, self-centered, and only care about your own interests. You don't know how to appreciate what you have." I got up and headed for the door. "Goodbye, Nell." After loading my personal belongings and tools into my truck, I drove out of the garage and drove away. That night, I drove for several hours in a row, trying to distance myself from her as much as possible. I drove all night until fatigue forced me to stop. My destination was the Gulf Coast, where there was a lot of construction work, and I could fit into society as an itinerant carpenter. I met other people who found themselves in similar circumstances. They were all trying to escape their past lives. My parents constantly informed me about the consequences of my departure. Nell lost her job, and the doctor went through a difficult divorce. After the breakup, we never got back together. Nell eventually found a job as a cashier at a supermarket, but unfortunately lost all their possessions, including their house, car, and furniture. She had to settle for a cheap apartment and didn't expect to get married again because she couldn't afford a divorce. Our children went to live with my parents, who raised them. I regularly sent money for their maintenance and even opened a savings fund for their college education. I also kept in touch with them by phone, sending postcards and money for Christmas and birthdays. 7 years after my departure, I returned home and was reunited with my children for a short time. Nell, who never fully recovered after my departure, established a strong bond with my parents. The children grew up to be responsible people whose upbringing fostered trust and devotion. During my visit, I went to the store where Nell worked as a cashier. As I passed her queue, her shocked expression turned pale, and she fainted when I asked how her life was going. I left without turning around and never saw her again.